keeping bees with a 3-beep system, and he's been doing it for quite a long time. And some of you showed interest in it to do something like that, so now's your chance to learn. Here's Tim.
Thanks again, everybody, for coming. Again, I'm Tim Ives, about 130 miles due east of here, just west of South Bend. Started beekeeping in 2001, and I'm going to go through the process of how and why I started doing this. I'm not here to tell you how to keep bees. I'm here to tell you how I keep my bees and the process that led me up to trying to get as many colonies started off in the spring, build up like these. Honeybees do a finite number of tasks. Beekeepers do an infinite number of tasks. The better you understand the finite tasks the honeybees do, the more infinite your beekeeping shall become. That comment stems from you ask a beekeeper 10 different beekeepers question, you get 11 answers. That's where that stems from. Well, you take 10 colonies of bees that are all equal and give them X amount of space, there's a pretty consistent average. Hey, what are you doing?
Technical difficulties.
Yeah.
There's a pretty consistent average of what them bees do. And it's understanding exactly what they do to get them to do what you want them to do.
I can see it right
It's
here.
working on the screen.
You thought this was going to be easy.
Yeah. I'm trying to get the string to do what you want to do.
Got a broken cord we gotta fix.
Sorry, Tim.
I started beekeeping in 2001. And the reason I started beekeeping was I used to consume 10 to 12 bottles of Mountain Dew a day. And when I quit drinking the soda pop, I started using honey. I can jump that one. Okay. This is why I started beekeeping.
Thank goodness.
March of 2001 was when I quit drinking soda pop and I started using honey. 1 quart of honey every other day, which may sound like a lot, but calorie-wise, that's only 3,600 calories, and 10 to 12 of these a day is 4,000 calories. So when I stopped drinking the soda and started using honey, I instantly dropped my calories in half. Then I had the brilliant idea that I thought it would be cheaper to start my own beehives versus buying honey. I thought. June of 2001, I got a nuke. One of my buddies got a nuke, and lost one of them the winter of 2001, 2002. Stacked all the boxes on top of the other. About the second week of June, it swarmed, and the whole thing was full of black locust honey, and I was really hooked. Split the hive, winter of 02, 03, lost the other hive. By the fall of 2003, lost the other hive due to American foul brood. Burned everything. Ordered 10 packages of bees from Kelly, built all brand new equipment. Through 2004, 2007, I played the package feed game. 5 packages, and I probably averaged 60 pounds of sugar per colony per each year. Each winter occurred 30 to 95% losses. 2004 had various sources of free lumber. I'm a union carpenter by trade, so building boxes was somewhat easy. So I started building boxes, and the jig table made up. I can mill out about 80 boxes in a day. Do 20 boards at one time. This is the long side. This is your short side. And that jig there. You get your clamps that clamps the boards this way, and right here is clamps that clamps the board sideways to the table. So I started making boxes.
What do you mill them with, Tim?
A router. Another free source of lumber was a stair manufacturer, and anything under 32 inches, they threw in a dumpster. This hive is all solid Brazilian cherries, including the frames. I traded that for 12 packages of bees, and that was in 2006. 2006, 2007 winter, I went into winter with 29 colonies, which 24 of them was packages that year. I lost 28 of them. 2007, I got the bright idea. This is more free lumber. That's all 9/16 material, box trading material that I got from one of the sources. Accumulated a couple thousand board feet of it. So this is all 9/16 material, and I got the bright idea to make up 80 of these. Well, I'll try to find enough spots to put 80 swarm catch boxes. I ended up with 40 spots. Caught 15 swarms. Also bought another 10 packages of bees in 2007. I got that kind of out of sequence. Ventilation. I used to make my inner cover notches the same as my entrance reducers at the bottom, 3 inches, and the bees would propylize that upper box down. This here is an empty box, and I got insulation in the top of it, 2 6-inch wide pieces and the solid piece that goes on top, and it kind of creates a chimney effect. So you don't have that cold air coming down on the bees, which creates the condensation, and you got all the hot air removing. And the bees also use that as an upper entrance. I'm right in the major lake effect area, right under Lake Michigan, and we can get hammered with a couple feet of snow overnight. And then it might get warm for 3 days, where it's 40 degrees, and the bees want out, and if they don't have a way to get out, that's not good. So I always have upper entrances on all my colonies. There's another one they propylize down. This is the insulation. I said I got 2 6-inch wide pieces and then a solid piece on top. Well, the bees, this is all drone comb that they put up in that upper box. 07, 08. Package bees. I lost package bees that winter. And all the swarms I caught, only lost 1. And my 06, 07 survivor, which I call that my $4,000 package, that's the only one that survived out of 54, so that's my $4,000 package. So I started off 2008 with 15 colonies. I didn't do much splitting at that time. Caught a few swarms, did a couple splits, went into winter with 21 3D colonies. Now this was actually 07 was the first year I did not use sugar on the colonies, and I have not used sugar on any of my bees since then. And this goes back to the way I started bees, or the reason I started bees, because I got away from the junk sugars and started using honey. So my original thought of using the 3D colonies was, everybody says your colonies are going to live 2 years, and you're going to lose 30% of your colonies every year. Okay, fine. Let's work with them parameters. I'm going to overwinter the 3D colonies. I'm going to lose 30% of them. Whatever. I know how to make more bees now. The 3D colony, pull a split off of it, drop it down to a 2 high body colony, throw a couple supers on it. That's your honey producing colony for that year. Your split's your honey producing colony for the next year. That was my original thought of using the 3D colonies and not feeding them sugar and leaving them extra honey on over the winter. I also started wrapping the colonies
For the winter.
for the winter. The tar paper really don't help with windbreak. What it does help with is solar. 1.5 degrees outside, box is reading 86.3. This was about 2:30 in the afternoon. Earlier that morning, it was about -17, and the tar paper was reading 43. This was February 13th of 2014. Fun polar vortex here. I got brave and popped the lid off, shooting down in the inner cover hole, 54.7 degrees and bees walking around. The entrance of this colony was facing north, and only the south and west side of this colony was wrapped. So it's only getting sun a certain period of the day. 2009 came out winter with 18 live from 21. One problem, the colonies came out of the winter a lot stronger. They was snapping into swarm mode about a month earlier than what I was used to supering up. I was used to supering about a week before black locust flow, which on average is May 20th in my area. So I was supering up about a week previous to that. These 3D colonies started swarming out on April 27th, and that happened the previous year is when they started swarming. So I ended up making a bunch of splits. Remember them 80 swarm catch boxes I made the previous year? Well, luckily I had equipment to catch the swarm and cover the splits until I got caught up on able to make regular boxes going in the winter with. Took 6 splits to Willard Phipps. Willard Phipps, he passed away in 2010, but he was about 91 years old, and he kept bees since he was 13. Highly against any treatments, and at that time he had not bought bees in about 20 years. So I took what I believe to be my best genetics at the time and took them close to his yard to get them queens bred with in his area. And this was Willard there. That was probably black locust honey, and I probably should have had a super on him before I moved him. Another problem in 2009, this was about 120 acres of cucumbers. They brought in 120 colonies of bees, and this was 1 mile away from my original yard, which was at his property. And they ended up robbing 12 of my colonies out. I was working construction really good that year, so I wasn't really into the bees a whole lot. in 2009, but I ended up losing 12 colonies to these 120. 2009, 2010 winter, I went in winter with 40 colonies and didn't lose any, which put me into a big bind on equipment. Didn't have enough supers, didn't have enough hive bodies, had to use them swarm catch boxes again to make splits. 3 choices with the 3D. Super them up, split them, or recognize whether or not that colony is going to superseed. What I find is colonies that do not move down, there's a high probability of that colony to be superseded. At that point, I take boxes away, call out all the old comb, drop it down to a single deep. Once they go through that supersedure process, add new boxes to it. I could easily requeen it with something else, because there's probably queen cells somewhere, but that's usually occurring on older queens that's lived 3 or 4 years. Do you really want to be trashing them survivor genetics? No. I just let them go through the process. That single deep isn't going to affect anything what I'm doing. Call out your old frames, anything that's good, use it somewhere that's usable. Yes.
What time of the year was that when they don't go down?
Again, I work with all averages of what the bees are doing. If you got 100 colonies and 95% of them drop down, and the 5 that didn't, them 5 that did not, there's a high probability they're going to supersede.
Is that for the winter? Drop down for the winter?
Late winter, early spring. I'll get to that.
Oh, okay.
I'll show you once I get to that. Power splitting. If you start off with 10 double deep colonies, don't lose any over 5 years, you would have 320. A consistent 30% loss each year, you would have 78. Power splitting triples. If you started off with 10 colonies, after 5 years, you would have 2,430. A consistent 30% loss, you would have 579. That's doing full hive body splits. Think about that. Power splitting and supering. And this is pretty much what I've done, but I'm a little bit shy of, about 30 shy of that number. Problem is the number of supers you also need. I started using 6 to 7 supers, and I'll get into why I started using that many in a little bit. But if you split half of them, super half of them, these would be your numbers after about 5 years. Colony sizes. I started doing a lot of, not a lot, but cutouts, a couple here and there. And one thing I noticed on colonies that had basically unlimited space was they occupied 8 to 9 hive bodies worth of comb. So that got me to thinking even more. This was March 14th, 2012. This one was the next day, different yard. What would you do if you see a colony like this? Add a box? Or split? How many say split?
Oh, split.
You split. How many say add boxes? Okay. Because of the timing of the year, adding boxes is your best bet. Unless you wanted to split, but you would have to buy queens because there was snow on the ground about 10 days previous. You have no drones. You will not have any mature drones for about 29, 30 days. So you cannot split and get them queens bred using your own queens. And also, these colonies are the ones that are producing the drones first. So splitting this colony, you're increasing your probability of inbreeding. So I never split these super strong, these super strong colonies because they're producing them drones first. The mediocre colonies are the ones I split to get bred with these colonies that are building up early. When this next brood cycle emerges, how many more bees are going to be there? The best way to calculate how much space a colony needs is count your brood frames. One frame of brood, 60% laid out, is going to be 2 frames of bees once they emerge. If it's 90 to 100% laid out, which is pretty rare on paired colony, they usually have the pollen honey band. But one that's 80% laid out or more, there could be 3 frames of bees. So for every frame of brood, there's going to be 2 frames of bees. These colonies are running 18 frame averages. 18 frames is 36 deep frames or 6 supers. And that's why I started using 6 supers, 6 to 7. Because otherwise the bees won't fit in there. In 2010, when I had the problem of not enough supers, I used 3 drawn and 1 new. They still filled them before the black locust flow. Of course, them colonies was close to an apple orchard. They filled them and still swarmed before the black locust flow. So that got me, what do I need to do to contain these bees? This is another in 2012. This is in the city of South Bend. Community gardens, they got about 50 free pick gardens throughout South Bend. And at that time, you couldn't have honeybees in the city unless you had more than 5 acres. Well, this particular spot had 10, so we could legally have the bees there. But we ended up getting it re-legalized to have bees in South Bend. Nice. That's the mayor. This was in 2012.
What do you get your hives setting on? They get that big and that heavy, what keeps them from settling in?
Then we're setting on 4x4s. I did have to go with heavier bottom boards, though. I've smashed bottom boards.
Well, that's the reason I'm asking. They get that heavy.
Yeah. Well, a lot of them I got palletized now. Just 2 pallets. So. This was in 2012. Randy Oliver, he was doing an article on neonicotinoids, cornfields, and 16 of my 22 yards, they're surrounded by corn or beans. I took them to three different yards. That's a pretty fun day. That's a cornfield right there. This colony is in an apple orchard, which they also spray with a cell, which is a neonicotinoid. I placed colonies there in 2007, and the only year I lost any bees there was the winter of 13-14, the night that it got down to -27 with 40, 50 mile an hour south winds. None of my colonies are protected from the south. And that was a pretty brutal night.
Does that mean that the units have not impacted your bees?
Apparently not.
Which ones?
That's corn. Right across from my house is corn. Like I said, 16 of 22 my yards, you could throw a stone and hit cornfields. So and furthermore, what's occurring in the springtime is fields of super weeds. What the problem is, say this is your field, farmer sprays Roundup all through here, and this part don't get applicated right, okay? So you get a little bit resistant weeds, you know, dandelions, chickweed, purple dead nettle, insbit. Then they go through with their plow, and they spread it. So you consistently keep bees alive in an area for over 10 years. What's them fields gonna look like? Super weeds. But that's all.
Tim, can I ask you a question?
Yes,
Were you moving the bees out or anything when they were spraying the apple trees?
I have not moved them bees since I've placed them.
And they just spray the apples when they need them?
He sprays them late in the evening,
Okay.
and of course, but I have not had a problem other than that -27 night. So, I don't know.
How often do you change out foundation?
When they go through the super procedure process. I'm not using chemicals on my hives, so until there's an obvious problem with that hive, I got brood boxes I haven't looked at in probably 5 years. I just throw supers on them every year. About 8 supers there.
Do they
This
tip
is a
over?
small commercial operation they bought out last year. Got a chain fed decapper, spinner, cat cut. Here's the fun pictures. This was taken this past winter. This was on January 7th, 2015. This is the 5-deep colony. This is a 3-deep colony, 4-deep colony, and a 2-deep colony. It doesn't matter what size colony it is, them bees go to the top. And that was one problem in 2013-14. A couple of my yards, I put wet supers on in September, and they're strong, they'll be all right. Bees heat the cluster. Now, I believe that was a very grave error I made by leaving them supers on them hives, because them were my highest loss yards, and everything else that was knocked down, that was fine.
So Tim, so you're giving them too much room is a bad thing when it's cold.
No, not too much room. Empty boxes above. Because that's 5 bees, but that's all full.
With honey, without honey in them.
Correct. Correct. That was, yeah. After seeing what they did.
Yeah.
But you don't rotate in the fall
Rotate for the purpose of what?
to get the bees down below and put your full, frames of honey above the bees.
They just do that. They do that themselves. And I'll get to why in a minute. These colonies are part of the USDA SARE grant, and that's how I got the thermal camera. The name of the SARE grant, and it's still ongoing up until, I believe, April of next year. Sustainability of using 3D colonies versus 2 in Indiana is the title of it. There was another individual that was also part of it. He ran 3D colonies, I ran 2D colonies. He used nukes and packages in the 3Ds, and he ended up losing 7 out of 10, and I lost 2 out of the 12 of the doubles. Theoretically, the triples should have done better than the doubles, but I used mostly all my stock. I did use 1 nuke and one package, and I did end up losing the nuke first. See how these 2 colonies here are a lot brighter? Those was overwinter colonies the previous year, and they was 5-6 deeps throughout the season. They had a lot more winter bees. They made a lot more bees, and they continue to act like what a 3D colony would. These other ones were about June, first week of June, created queens, build up to the 2 deeps. This is 3 deeps, 1 super, 2 deeps, 2 supers. This was January 7th. That was the end of January. That was February 15th, and I was somewhat nervous. That was close to -30 that night and pretty good wind. So I went out about 11:30 at night with that thermal cam and started looking at hives behind the house. But after I'd seen how much they was glowing, I wasn't worried as much anymore. Yes.
Did you pull back the insulation to take that picture, or is that snow up there?
There's yeah, that's snow, and there's a piece of a thin piece of rubber that's sitting on top of it, and it's out. So if enough snow gets on the top of it, it don't rain down on the entrance, basically.
I mean, how you keeping them fed all winter? Winters can be pretty long. You broke them down quite a ways. You've got a lot of bees in there building a lot of heat.
Well, and that's an interesting question. From what I'm seeing, you know, everybody has the notion that more bees are eating more. I'm not seeing that. They're actually heating them hives a lot easier versus the smaller colony. And they're actually, see how this,
Bulbs all the way down.
they're brooding. This is, that one was, see how this is increasing? That's February 15th.
I'm impressed by this because I can't see how they can brood and feed the brood and get everything built up on the small amount of food you left behind.
Well, that's 3 Ds and super. So that's 3 D.
They were full. They were
Oh yes, them were full. Yeah.
I thought the bottom one, I think it said
No.
all ago the bottom one was in.
That was the previous year.
Nah,
Yeah.
These are wraps.
that's, I misunderstood.
What's that?
I said these are wraps. I mean, it looks like an X-ray type of thing, so
that
it's
tar
hard to
paper
tell
only?
if they're wrapped or whatever, because it looks like you can see the handhold.
Yeah. These are not wrapped. These don't get much sun. The only thing on this colony right here, this side has tar paper on it. Otherwise, them colonies don't get sun. They're kind of down the hill behind my house, and that colony may get an hour, hour and a half worth of sun.
How do you attach it, the tar paper to the?
5/16 staples.
Just on the sides that face
Yeah,
the
and
sun?
usually what I do is cut 20-inch pieces, do the long sides first, and them sides don't need that many staples. And then The 20-inch piece I'll put on the short sides and wrap them around. The short size is easier to use 15-pound felt because it's harder to wrap the 30. I just use whatever.
You just use it on the sunny sides, right?
I started to, yes. I used to do all four, but after
North.
unless it's some old equipment and I got to use a lot of duct tape also. Yeah. I might be more apt to wrap them.
Yeah.
This one was March 3rd. See how this heat signature is increasing? Since this one's getting more sun, they're increasing more than this one. March 18th, so this has increased more. Now this one's starting to catch up. That's first week of April. 3 deep versus 2. That one's actually 2 deeps to 2 mediums. Beginning of March. The problem with 2 deeps, the previous year, you competed that bottom deep for either brood or pollen. In a 3 deep colony, that bottom box has more pollen in it. They're going into winter with more fat bees because that queen had more room to brood and you got more honey above. Where 2 deep, you don't have as many winter bees and you don't have as much pollen. And that's the reason the common practice is to reverse your doubles. Because a lot of times they stay at the top. There's no pollen. They can't move down. A 3 deep, they move down. That's where the pollen is. And then they grew back up.
Now, you said you put an empty box on top with insulation in it.
Right there, yes.
The other one don't have it?
Yeah, actually I think it does. This one, these are wrapped. At least that one. This one just might be wrapped on this side. These do get a lot more sun. These are the same colonies.
Insulation sits on top of the top board? Inner cover?
There's your, that's how it was overwintered. Checkerboard and supers. I tried checkerboard and frames. I didn't really like it because you got to incorporate using honey frames with new frames. I want that honey in a bucket, and I want them bees filling them frames. So what I started doing was putting a brand new super at the bottom, drawn 9-frame super, new, drawn. These probably hard telling. My tan boxes are usually new foundation. My yellow boxes are drawn foundation.
You're pulling all them big supers off full and putting an empty on the bottom?
If they're full and capped, I'm extracting.
Yeah, I thought you said you put an empty on the bottom. That means
To
you're
start.
something on top.
To start off with. Now, if you want drawn comb and you got your timing down, you can keep rotating.
I steal all the time.
Sure.
Am I running out of honey? I steal.
You can keep rotating down it if you need more drawn comb, but that is tedious, but it is possible. Yes?
2 questions. Do you use queen excluders?
No reason to.
Because she's got plenty of room.
Well,
Unlimited.
she has plenty of room, but also that is your queen excluder. And on a honey flow, they're going to fill that drawn comb first. So that's going to get filled before they start drawing that. And that's doing 2 things. Them large population of bees, you're enticing their hoarding behavior, and them new boxes, is depleting your wax builders. Wax builders are 7 to 17-day-old bees. If you fail to super these, they backfill that brood nest, then wax builders get primed, and they go find brood somewhere else. You're controlling that. You're enticing the hoarding behavior, and you're depleting the wax builders. Two major precursors to cast swarms. Yes?
So I tried that this past season, and by the time they got drawn out, she moved up, started laying eggs in my wax foundation, in my honey foundation. Basically, I'm assuming she didn't have enough room.
They started backfilling. How many supers did you have on? Well, it's possible that they still didn't have enough room, and they started backfilling the brood nest either down below, and she has that. They probably had the honey dome around it, and she laid it out. Yeah.
My second question was, do you start off with 10 frames of new?
Yes.
Okay, and then remove one?
Yes. As soon as they get drawn out.
A lot of them in the boxes.
Well, I got to the point where I just know my flows, and I don't really worry about rotating as much anymore. I used to be a lot more diligent about it, but a lot more work.
Hey, Tim, what kind
Apple
of,
blossom honey.
what kind of bottom boards are you using? Screened or?
That's another good question. I'll get to that in a moment.
Okay.
I didn't put that in my presentation, so I'm glad you brought that up.
I got a question.
Apple blossom honey.
When you put your supers out, you put them all on
Yes.
at one time?
Yes, because go back to the picture of the bees bearding in March. Once that next brood cycle emerges, how many more bees are going to be in there? And that's the reason I started using this 6 or 7.
All of them on?
Because, because the average was, there's 18 frames of brood. I've seen low side of 15, high side of 20. Average, there's 18. That's 6 supers worth of space. And that's just, now in 2011, I tried 10 supers, but out of the counties, 7 was the average that they filled by mid-June. So I dropped back to using the 7 so I could super up more colonies. March 20th of this year, this is 4 dates. One of the relatively new beekeepers in my area, he's been following what I've been doing, and he came out, he went into winter of 6, came out of winter of 6, and calls me up, must have been March 16th or 17th, and says he wants to split his hives. So, well, I got to get queens from somewhere. He's like, I got some lined up, but I got to get 16 of them. Can you use 10 of them? I said, yeah, I could probably, which I've never made nukes up before in March. I said, yeah, I probably got some colonies strong enough to make nukes up. I said, yeah, I'll take 10 of them. So I made these nukes up March 20th this year using Italians from Georgia. Biggest reason, once I was able to raise queens myself, I got all these Italians producing brood. So I just started stealing brood to add to once I started grafting queens. One problem was on March 28th, 29th, we had 2 days that it got down to 10 degrees. Well, these queens was released on Tuesday, put them in on Saturday, released them on Tuesday. Thursday, Friday is when it got cold. They would have had, she would have started laying and she would have had nothing but eggs and they would have cannibalized. So every night I screened them off and took them inside. And about 10 o'clock in the morning, I'd take them back out. 5 o'clock in the evening, I'd take them back in. I did that for about 2 weeks.
That's a lot of work.
Same nukes, March 3rd. That
May
I had, that was actually a cell builder at that time. I pulled the queen, a couple frames of brood, made another nuke, and started grafting on my preferred stocks. That was, ended up using that as a cell builder. Previously, the last 2 years, I never really grafted before. Previously, I just, whatever hives I did in super, end of April, they'd be full of swarm cells. So I've always used swarm cells before, and they've always produced so many. I didn't have enough room for them all anyway. So previously to 2013, I just made full hive body splits, equalized all resources, and that's the way I perpetuated. Nukes and grafting is kind of a new game for me the past couple years. Last year was the winter of 13-14 was the first year I tried overwintering nukes, and that was a slaughter. It was fine up until mid-February. I started using half frames. These are all 6-frame boxes, which are compatible with the half frames. And I made up a bunch of 4-frame, half-frame nukes for the purpose of raising queens. Typical question, how do you find a queen in them tall stacks? When I tear this apart, I don't smoke them. That'll get them bees running, that'll get them queens running. I quickly tear them apart, and that right there was the first box I looked at. Had the most bees in it. 4th frame, found that queen. I always look, just quickly tear them apart. Look at, this would have been the 2nd box I would have looked at if I didn't find her in there. But you can also, if you watch the bees on them top bars, they'll start fanning where she's at. So the box with the most bees, and watch them bees fan. And work from the outside in. Yeah, I covered the checkerboarding of some colonies. Now this one here, that was a so-so hive, and that would be the one that I ended up splitting. As soon as, this was probably 2010 or 11. So I was just using swarm cells at that time.
You had a hole in that one super factory where the bees are halfway up.
Yeah. And I started, after seeing that a lot, I started running mid-entrances a lot more.
They like them holes.
Yeah, and upper entrances.
How did you make the middle one? Did you put a shim in or something?
That one was probably just wear and tear.
Oh, okay. It was a natural entrance.
Like this one here, if I took away the duct tape, it would
Yeah.
have plenty.
No entrance.
Hive limitations. A queen can only lay so many eggs in a cycle. Once you start working with a large number of colonies, there is a pretty consistent average of what's going on. And it's working with them within them averages. Bees will only draw so much new comb in a year. Why? Because your most proficient wax builders are your 7 to 17 day old bees. So they're only going to draw so much comb in a year because of the limitations. Set dynamics within a hive. That brood goes in a certain space. If the brood nest gets backfilled, she's going to go up. They put the honey on the outside, they put the pollen next. Honey is usually above. Understanding and working with them dynamics, you can expand or contract them colonies within her limitations. What's your limitation? Obviously, not everybody in here is going to be climbing ladders to get supers down. I mean, they're understandable. Everybody's got limitations. Average swarming activity in your area. Fresh pollen starts coming in about March 11th in my area. And within a few days of fresh pollen coming in is when they start them drones. Drones from egg to mature drone is 40 days. On queens, egg to mature queen is 24 to 27 days. So drones need to be started at least 16 days previous to what queens are started. So whenever your fresh pollen comes in, they start the drones shortly after, and about 6 weeks from fresh pollen is when they start swarming. On the years that the colonies were swarming out on April 27th, that got me to rethink, okay, if they're swarming on the 27th, they started making them queen cells up on April 11th. I need them boxes on well before that queen cell start date. But you don't want it on too early where they can still get too cold. So there's a kind of a fine line on when to get them supers on. And I usually do it within about a 3-day period, go through all the yards and get them on. String bottom boards.
Can I ask you a question again?
Yes.
You lost me on the timing on the fresh pollen. When there's fresh pollen, they start the drones. Do they wait a couple of weeks before they start the queens? Or they start them both at the same time?
From what I've seen, if March 11th was the start date. The start date on the queen cells was April 11th.
Oh, okay.
Swarming was the 27th. The one year that was warm, fresh pollen started coming in on February 29th, which was a week or so, that must have been 2012. Swarming started on April 16th.
I remember he's got better weather than we do. Okay, ours don't start this.
Okay, so to summarize, you go into the winter with 3 deeps.
Ideally, yes.
All right, let's get and then around March 11th, shortly after that, you go in and you add 6 supers.
It's usually into March.
End of March. All right. And then those 6 supers, the first one you add
It's
is
brand new.
foundation.
Correct.
This next 2 are going to be drawn comb,
Correct.
and then foundation,
Correct.
and then 2 more drawn comb.
Correct.
Okay. And then you just leave it.
Correct.
And then when
Until
do
they
you check?
fill it with honey.
And what do you check every?
Well,
3 weeks?
again, depends on, some of my yards are close to apple orchards, so of course that's going to be an earlier flow than other yards that aren't around any orchards. So you got to kind of understand what's blooming in whatever area that your yards are in.
And how do you determine which one to take off?
Well, I could do it a lot easier now with that thermal cam. I can go through in February and tell which one's brooding then.
Oh, don't have that, so.
Yeah, right.
but you're
Before
looking at
what I
6
did was I used a stethoscope and took the end piece off and just used the tube, used a single tube stethoscope, put that in the bottom, put it in the top. If they sound louder at the top, they're up high. If they sound louder at the bottom, they're down low. If it sounds equal, they're in the middle. Yes?
Are you having any kind of pest issues? Grow, grow a small hive beetle?
Small hive beetle can be more of a problem. Because them colonies are brooding up so much earlier, them queens are just flat out outbrooding the varroa. Varroa needs drone brood to be most prolific. On worker brood, a varroa can only get one mature female in. They need the drone brood to get all four. And since they got almost the whole brood cycle in before they start the drones, plus that queen has 50% more room, so that's another thing, the population difference between a double deep and a triple. Since them triples are brooding up almost a brood cycle earlier, and that queen has 50% more room, from the time that the doubles start brooding, 2 brood cycles later, them triples have 300% more bees. Think about that. On board. A couple years, I ran about half my production colonies with screen bottom boards and about half with solid bottom boards. The queens were reluctant to drop down early, thus creating less bees, thus creating less honey, and it pissed me off enough that I eliminated all my.
Don't like screen bottom board.
I eliminated all the screen bottom board. My money's made on honey.
When you had your screen bottom boards, were you using closeouts?
Yes.
Yeah, sure. Yeah, I closed them off until I pulled the mouse guards in April. This year I didn't even pull the entrance reducers. I think we only had 3 days that was above 90 degrees. So I didn't pull them, but I also got middle entrance and upper entrance.
Well, can I ask you what your typical honey harvest is then, or average per hive?
That very first,
I mean, if you're looking at 7 supers worth of honey, that'd be pretty substantial harvest there.
yes it is. That's only July.
On some of these pictures, I see 2 deeps on the bottom.
He said that.
2 deeps, 2 supers, because there's
All right. Supers are used for brood.
yeah.
Why
Just
don't you go
because-
3 deep?
Because I had more supers than I need.
All right.
When you pull your honey, do you ever say you got a commercial on that?
What's that?
When you pull your honey, you say you got a commercial. I like to pull my honey off whenever certain things are in. In other words, I don't bucket all mine out at the same time. I bottle mine out and I get different flavors for each one.
Yes.
I can't do it the amount you're doing it, but I can get what I want.
If you could repeat what he's saying so we could hear that and then hear your answer.
He asked, when you're pulling honey, itemizing specific honeys. Do I itemize specific honeys? Yes, to a point. If I'm pulling down a bunch of yards, it pretty much gets all mixed. The colonies that I have in the Unity Gardens, they're all specific, and I pull them separately and decap them by hand and extract them differently because it's marketed differently.
Your yield, you were gonna talk about.
This yard here, First 12 hives, 14 supers, average that year. That first one did 16 and drew out 7 brand new. So that's well over 400 pounds per colony. This year,
That's my whole
June.
yard.
What's that?
That's all my yards combined.
This year, June, it rained a lot, and colonies went backwards. The yards that had close to the orchards, I pull them down before black locust blooms to get the apple blossom and blueberry blossom honey. Black locust was minimal. Tulip poplar was so-so. Pull them down. Your next flow is clover, and the end of June is the basswood, and then colonies went backwards big time. A lot of the colonies didn't draw a comb, and that was another thing. Whatever comb that they didn't draw, you need to get them off mid-June. Them bigger colonies, you done lost the momentum of them wax coaters, and they're at the top of the bell curve mid-June, and they start going down on population after that. Now, if you start colonies in March, they peak out a lot differently. The later you make splits, the later out they'll peak. These bigger colonies peak sooner. But I want black locust the most, and the basswood. So I want them peaking here in the months. Now, if I'm going through, and that one probably swarmed. Like,
And you on the ladder?
yeah, that's what I like. Actually, them are new boxes. So that one probably superseded. And some are new boxes. But if you're going through a yard and this one's full, this one's full, this one's only got one. High probability that colony swarm. Once you get a new queen in there, when I pull in August before goldenrod, that colony, that swarm, usually puts up more honey versus the other colony because you got a new queen in there. It changes the rotation of that colony peaking. So they'll actually put more honey on later on versus your other colonies. This is the year I tried 10 supers. I borrowed 200 supers, and the average was 7. And again, that's why I dropped back to using 7 supers, because none of them filled all 10 before mid-June. I pull them off mid-June, end of July, put them back on, and pull them again in August before goldenrod. And I'll still put them back on. Sometimes goldenrod they'll produce, sometimes not. I think that was it.
Much goldenrod this year?
Some yards were better than others. I mean, it was
So dry here.
well, biggest thing on goldenrod is how much rain you get when them flowers are first coming up. So it's more about how much moisture was in the ground when they start sprouting on goldenrod. Unless it's just so hot and it just sucks everything out.
That was a great bloom.
Okay, I think that was it. Okay, more questions? Yes.
You mentioned the bees, like the bees work their way down.
Correct.
Is that after you pull the supers going into winter, when do they start moving down?
I don't have any that are disease were late November, early December picks on them doubles. These were January. So I guess as soon as it gets cold, I'd have to look at November, December picks to see exactly where they're at.
They'll move honey up or,
Them 3 deep, that third deep's full.
so they're-
And they actually, them third deeps get filled in July. They start brooding down June, late June, and they start brooding down. They backfill that third deep with honey, and then in the fall, they backfill that bottom deep with mostly pollen. That bottom deep is probably 60–70% pollen. You might have honey on the outside, a couple empty drawn combs in the middle. That second deep is about 60% honey, 20% pollen. Maybe some open comb in the middle, and that top deep is 95% honey, a little bit of pollen. Yes?
You said you beat up your bottom boards. How'd you do that? What'd you do?
Yeah, 5/4 oak.
Whoa. Okay.
And then I also, that's on a pallet. There were 4x4s there, 4x4 in the middle, 4x4 there, 2x4s going across, and then 3/4 plywood. But them, I can move with the Bobcat. Yes.
What do you use for bee removal when you take off?
Bee blower, or leaf blower.
And how big of a crew do you have?
There's
handing supers down off these step ladders?
a retired 72-year-old iron worker and another gentleman. And I help them pull their honey, but I'm the one on the ladder. But I hand it down to Jim. He sets it up for Roger, blows it, goes onto a pallet. Once we get 12 to a pallet, load it up with Bobcat. So once bringing it down and load it on the pallet, after that, they don't get touched again until you extract it. Move the boxes for extraction.
Go on out and start walking to the Bobcat or the pallet, and the bees follow you and land back on.
Depends on the time of year. That's more August. That's more the case than anything. Yes. Yes, sir.
Do you worry about feeding at all?
No. If them third deeps are full, them honey supers don't get full. And they backfill them third deeps. Now, there are some colonies I'm afraid to take too much away, just because there's so many bees in there. But here's the thing: if they don't use it all before super in April, I can extract it in April. It's all 100% honey, since I didn't give them anything. And I started doing that a lot more. Yes, sir.
How often do you check your hives, and then do you ever find them they've blown over?
Blown over, yes. How often do I check the hives? Again, I just work by colony averages. Anything well below what the average is going on, why? I'll get into.
Well, do you get it once a week, every 2 weeks, or how many
No,
yards have you got?
What's that?
How many yards have you got?
22 different yards.
Oh, wow.
And it's kind of quadrant off. So it just depends on your flow. It's all about the honey flows once you got a super. I super them all up in about 3 days. And then it's just, you know, like I said earlier, the ones that are closer to the orchards, them are ones I usually get pulled first. So on.
What happens then when one falls over?
It's what happens to a hive when it falls over.
That's like
Or hide.
We've done that before.
all those hives there. Yeah.
It's not fun.
A lot of the yards, the property owners, they watch some highs pretty good. And some are more prone to the high winds, especially like the ones at the apple orchard, because there's no, I've probably had them blown over more than any other yards put together. And the one year, you could see I had them strapped. And I had to even change the way I strapped them, because I just originally had them on cinder blocks, and I strapped them around, well, that was like a weeble. It didn't come back up. Because here's the problem. Once that gets filled with honey, then it can become top heavy, and you get a really high wind, and it can take that down. And I've even had it on these 2 high pallets with 6 supers, top heavy, and it just walked them over like nothing. Even though they was even strapped, which creates more of a problem because they're strapped down pretty good, and you're breaking something with that leverage. Yes, sir.
Yeah, would you recommend like wrapping your hives totally? And then I got another question about your the
Insulation box.
Insulation box. Do you have an inner cover, and can you kind of describe what you did a little bit better?
Well, I make all my own inner covers
Yeah.
just so I could put a 3/8 by 3/4 notch. So you need at least 3/8 on the top side of that, or big enough that the bees can get out and mice can't. Mice can be a big problem. I've had them get in the inner cover hole if it's too big. 2 6-inch wide pieces of insulation, which creates a 2.5-inch wide channel down the middle. And I like using 2-inch thick insulation and then a solid piece on top. And that creates a channel down the middle. Pretty simple.
And that's below your inner cover.
That's above the inner cover in an empty box.
Okay.
I used to use supers until one year I needed a lot more supers. And I had a bunch of 1x4, so I dropped it down to 1x4 and used the supers. Yes, sir.
In many of the cases, the pictures don't have 3 deeps. Are you saying mostly that it's the space that would be taken up by 3 deeps, so you're making it up somehow between shallows and mediums?
Yeah, there was 3 deeps are equivalents, because someone was 3 mediums and a deep, 2 deeps, 2 mediums.
Okay.
Just because
3 deeps are better. You don't have the space.
Some colonies I don't plan on splitting. It's the colonies that it's a lot easier to equalize your resources using the 3 deeps.
Yeah. One of the questions, I teach a lot, and one of the questions I get from folks is, well, gee, can I use the equivalent of that 3 deep
Sure.
or 2 deep with the mediums? And if so, then why would you have deeps to begin with, since you can then have one set of equipment to work with instead of all these deep and deep frames and then medium frames and the whole
Using
thing?
all medium equipment costs 20% more. And extraction wise,
But you're not seeing any difference then between the size of the bee box and how the bees cluster in that,
Correct.
how they cluster between 2 mediums.
correct, no difference.
How many mediums would you use to equal 3 deeps?
Well, a deep frame has 4,500 cells. A deep frame has 7,000 cells. So you got 45,000 cells. So on 3 mediums, you got 135,000 cells. 2 deeps, you got 140,000 cells. So 3 mediums is actually 5,000 cells less than 3 deeps. Now, if you use 1-piece plastic, that has 10% more cells to it. 1-piece plastic, the mediums have almost 5,000, and the deeps have 7,700.
So how many does that come out to then mediums?
On the
How many medium boxes equal your 3 deeps?
6.
to equal 3 deeps. You got,
It's 6 and 10.
it's close to 6, but it's not, yeah, it's not quite 6. Probably 6. There's 210,000 cells in 3 deeps. And 4 mediums would be 90,000. So it's about 4.5. Closer to 5. Yes.
I had actually got fixed with these because I was gonna go with 3 deeps.
Sure.
But this year was kind of crappy.
Yes, it was.
So I didn't do it. I don't have all this, drawn out deep foundations, all this other kind of stuff.
Mhm.
I guess, when would I put these things on to switch it over from 2 to 3? And how would I do it? Put it on the
When
top?
I make splits, I immediately add a deep. And as soon as that queen starts laying, I pull a brood frame up. If they haven't started drawing, I'll pull a brood frame up.
It's pyramiding.
And then in about less than 3 weeks, I'll pull 2 brood frames to that 3rd deep.
So if you have 2, you're saying you just put that 3rd right on top, so it's.
Correct.
So don't just 3rd.
But I pull brood frame from the bottom one, from the 2nd one, and put them in the 3rd one, and I line up brand new frames vertically in the center. Make sure there's brood frames on both sides and keep them frames tight. They will draw them out the quickest. You can do that a couple times, but you gotta be careful that you don't get too much brood, because especially if you don't have enough supers.
So you do that, and then how long do you wait, when you're developing these 3 deeps, how long do you wait before you super?
Let's go back to breeding the brood. It's all about how much brood do you have. Because once that brood emerges out in 3 weeks, there's going to be that many more bees in there. So the easiest way to read how much space you need is simply count your brood frames and add accordingly. Because that's how many more bees are going to be in there in 3 weeks.
What was that number again? Brood frame to, what was the?
1 frame of brood equals 2 frames of bees. And it doesn't matter if you're using deeps or mediums. One medium frame is going to be 2 medium frames of bees, so on and so forth. Yes, sir.
Any issues with small hive beetles?
Yes. I have not lost one of the tall stacks. In July, if a colony swarmed, say end of June, July, and that colony ends up queenless, I would say 1 out of 100, about every other year, I'll end up with them bottom 3 deep slimed up. That's happened.
Do you do anything, put traps in, or just forget about
For the most part, the bees keep them in check, and they're not a major problem. Like I said, I haven't had one take out a whole staff. And these brutal winters, they keep them in check pretty good.
Can I go back to the Varroa though?
Yeah, what are them?
Well, as an example, in 2011, that was like the winter that wasn't. So 2012, everybody had really great survival, okay?
Sure.
And so it also turned out to be a drought year 2012 in our area anyway. And it was also a very productive year for honey production. But what wound up happening, and it was written about after that, was that because the bees wintered so well and we came through very strong, they also, the Varroa just bred significantly as well. So by October, and not just our region, but pretty much the U.S., suffered already like 30% losses before even going into the winter. So I just wonder, I guess I'm a skeptic, okay? And I just wonder how you avoid that.
If you take 2 equal swarms, let's say 5-pound swarms with 1% plant loads, You keep one in a single deep. Let's start off with 3. All equal. You start one, keep one in a single deep. You keep one in a double deep, and you keep one in a 3 deep. Which one is going to have more mites?
Well, from the experiences you saw, the bigger, the stronger the colony, the quicker the crash.
Which one's going to have more mites is the question.
Single D.
How many people? How many people say the single deep's going to have the most mites?
Oh,
How many people say the double deep's going to have the most mites?
Like the B ratio.
How many say the 3 deep's going to have the most mites? And who did I hear say the correct answer? They're all even. Correct. They are all even. They all have equal mites. It's your mite B ratio. Your single deep has 3 times the mite B ratio as the 3 deep. Your mite B ratio is dramatically lower. Now, let's add in any kind of hygienic behavior. One thing I noticed on the swarms was they removed the larva that was infected. So you got this huge population, and any percentage of hygienic behavior, are you going to have mite problems? I can tell you no. I participated 4 years in the USDA honeybee survey test. 75% of the apiaries tested was higher than me. I also participated in the pollen survey. The top 6 chemicals put into beehives are beekeeper applied chemicals, and you add the percentages up, they add up to 158%. So in 58% of the apiaries, there was 2 beekeeper applied chemicals, and these are mostly miticides.
Did you attribute most of your success to starting the swarms?
Considering each year I lost the packet bees, and nutrition still another variable. And that's another thing. I got away from feeding the junk food. So is that another variable? I can't say 100%. I don't have any way to quantify that. Yes.
I'm interested in brand foundations.
Plastic.
All plastic.
Right cell. I'm using chain fed decapper.
Or fruit branches.
Correct. I have the least amount of problems with plastic.
Is that 4.9 or 5.4?
I swear off small cell. I literally swear off small cell. All my bees are 5.4, and I'm not having a problem. And to change out everything, it cost me $200,000 to regress them. I don't want them any place close to me. Keep them away. Try to put 5.4 raised bees on 4.9. What's going to happen?
Well, I get them down to 5.2.
Well, you got to regress them. You can't just.
It takes years.
Right. You can't just throw them on.
Right.
So you start mixing the genetics. Try to put 4.9 bees on 5.4. What are they going to do? And using the 4.9, are you going to create smaller mites at some point too? I mean, you regress the bees, why can't you regress the mites? The difference in size of a male mite and a female mite is 50%. So to regress the mite down 10%, yeah, that's, I don't see how that couldn't happen. So really, let's make smaller mites too. Yeah, that's another good question. When we find
What was the question?
Home honey.
Comb
Comb
honey,
honey.
it doesn't do anything with comb honey.
Can you guess where my cut comb boxes are? Yeah, I did get apple blossom cut comb. These are cut comb boxes. So I can't miss them.
Do they work? I have nothing but problem with cutting.
Oh, cut.
Well,
Yeah, no, they were just finished foundation. Now Ross Rounds,
oh, all right, you're cutting that.
yeah. I tried Ross Rounds a couple times and I haven't got the finesse of that yet.
So what did Randy Oliver say when he saw your hives?
Consistently lucky. No, you read the original article appears in July 12, American Bee Journal, page 698 through 704. The picture that was on
Website?
the website, that was actually taken by Randy Halliburton. Then he did another article. It was in October 13, ABJ. I think it was page 1098. The second and third paragraph, he pretty much says he don't know how getting around dealing with them. I've sent him my USDA reports too. There you go. It has my counts on it. It's got the pollen analysis on it. Now Zima counts 0.0 spores.
Was that article, was that Randy's article on Neil Nix? Was that part of that article?
Yeah, I was in that article, part of it. There was a multi-series article, but when he was out, that was actually for that article. Like I said, that was July 12th, American Bee Journal. But you can also go to his website and pull that up. I think that was Sick Bees. No, that was I forget how that was titled now.
Do you know many other beekeepers that are using your system?
Yeah, it's about everybody that helps me. A lot of southern beekeepers. I got a pretty good Facebook following, and that's how Bill came across me. Exactly how did you come across me on Facebook, Bill?
I just noticed you liked the pictures and stuff. And
Was it a particular bee group Facebook page or?
on Facebook, you
Yeah, I know.
use you don't use sugar at all or any chemicals in your hive.
Oh, was it the Northern Beekeeper group or what?
Ives, East Bees, maybe?
Okay, that's our grant page.
In Northern.
Okay, it's probably Northern, and I was probably being cocky on pictures. Yes.
Now that winter's coming out, will you go through and check, and if you find a light hive, what will you do?
It's done robbed out.
Oh.
Because there's,
They're so strong.
I call that the level 1 bond. Because anything that's weak, they're done robbed out. Because them other hives, I usually got 12 to 20 hives in the yard. The ones that are built up, and if you got a weak hive, it's done robbed. So, best thing is make sure.
Close it up for the winter, huh?
Right.
Uh-huh.
Now, if there's pollen frames in it, I'll yank them pollen frames out because they were gold in the spring. Yes?
Oh,
I'm wondering how you would handle a situation. For the spring, I got a really good honey flow from my apple trees around me. And then going into the summer, because of the rain, the hive definitely had a weakening, and so going into this fall, they had very little capped honey. I would say less than half a super full. How would you handle getting them prepared for the winter? Because they're not going into the winter with a very strong supply. There was quite a bit of pollen, but not that much honey.
I also keep extra hives for honey, and I'm able to move it around. I'm just doing it by sheer numbers.
What would you recommend for somebody that doesn't have that?
It took me 7 years of losing hives. There's no magic answer to your question at the moment. I mean,
You wouldn't feed them
you can try if you want.
Hey, Tim.
Yes.
Going back to the pollen, frames, we've been noticing a lot of pollen's coated over with propolis. Have you noticed that? Is that a problem, or the bees are
That
fine?
could be a problem.
Okay.
Yes.
Do you cull out those frames?
Yes, I would.
Oh, okay.
They're propolizing that pollen. There's something wrong with that pollen, and they're hygienic enough to know that, hey, we're not touching that.
Oh, okay.
So yeah, if I seen a high percentage, question was, bees are propolizing pollen frames off, what would you do? If you see a high percentage of them pollen frames propolized, them bees know there's something wrong with it. Get rid of it. Yes?
I noticed you say your hives are on cinder blocks, 4x4s, and things like that. What do you do for ant control?
That upper box, as long as you got enough space above that inner cover, them ants really don't get up in there. If you got your lid tight to your inner cover, then you have more ant problems.
They don't go in the entrance?
I don't see much of a problem with them, no.
Where do you market your honey?
Any place possible. I used to sell to a lot of Amish. Since I got affiliated with the Unity Gardens, they're always setting up somewhere, because they got 50 free pick gardens, plus they got greenhouses.
The library will close in 30 minutes at 9 o'clock. Okay. Please bring any materials that you wish to check out to the checkout desk. Please complete your copying and printing as soon as possible. If you need to call for a ride, please make a call now so that your ride will arrive by 9 o'clock. Thank you.
About 10 more minutes.
Okay, right.
You don't do farmers markets.
I don't have time to do farmers
I
markets.
didn't think so.
No. Worst case scenario, Laney Family Honey is about 5 miles away, and he would take absolutely every drop of it for dirt cheap price. But worst case, I could sell whatever to him.
Entrances, then again, one more time, for summer and winter. You have regular bottom entrance in the summer,
Correct.
and the top also,
Correct.
and you said maybe one in the middle.
Correct.
And then what about winter?
Top and bottom. Sometimes if there's a corner that's broke out a little bit, I might just leave that and flip the tar paper up.
And then your mouse guard, you wood or?
Hardwood, Brazilian cherry.
Just very small.
3/8 by 3/4 or 3 inches. Walnut's pretty soft compared to the Brazilian cherry. Yes.
Obviously, you end up with a lot of Ron comb and supers that you need to store. What's the method for keeping the wax moths out? And
I take them off so late and I put them on so early. It's not a problem. Just make sure you get them off. That is a problem.
so, meaning that it's so cold at that point,
Correct.
the wax moth is gone or whatever.
Correct. And I'm getting them on into March, beginning of April.
And the storage area that you've got them in is cold enough that it just keeps them at bay.
Correct.
Do you have any kind of a write-up anymore on your method, or is it just
in the process. Because each year I refine something a little different. So there's a lot of trial and error that's went into what I've been doing. So if I would have came up with something 3 years ago, I would have tweaked it a little bit more since then. So I come up with exact concrete things. Because there's still some things going on that I can't explain yet. You know what I mean?
You have anything written up like, you know, I put this in the top, but like you said, the 2 shoes.
No, I just make these and honey.
We had a question and answer on one of the Facebook pages too. We just questions from everybody. What I do is every time I see something from them, I just take a picture with my phone and kind of memorize it. I got hundreds of pictures of them answering questions and stuff, and I just go over it a lot. And I talk to them on Facebook too, and it's really good about answering my questions better too. A lot of times, sometimes if you see them on Facebook, they'll answer a question that's kind of open, so they kind of dig a little further if they're interested too. Things like I had a question too on that one yard you got, the 14 superstar. Was the area a lot different from the other ones? Where you had a lot more pollen and nectar and stuff and flowers and trees?
No, I don't. It's not close to the orchard, so usually ones that are closer to the orchards usually put up more. So I'm not exactly sure. Black locust, the farmer, there's a dairy farmer across the road that ran a few hundred head of cattle, but he planted a lot of corn. But he used to be a beekeeper, and he had 4 rows of black locust trees, but he wiped them out 2 years ago to put pivot irrigations in. So there's still two of the rows left, but he wiped out probably 500 trees. Yes?
Do you have a ratio of number of hives within a certain area type of thing?
Well, that's a good question. Ratio of hives in an area. The longer you keep bees in the area, the more prolific the area becomes. So initially you might not be able to start off with too many, but you can grow that more just because the area is becoming more prolific. You know, the house I bought 5 years ago, there was maybe 2 dandelions in the yard, and now there's 20,000 of them. But you just kind of got to fill out the area. Yes.
So in your story in the beginning, you were saying, you know, first years were rough, you had big losses, all this and that.
Right.
You know, which is, you know, I know all too well. But where did you kind of reach that critical mass where you started to get off packages and start using your own bees? And because it sounds like that's probably where you're really successful, if you kind of got your own stock and genetics.
Yeah, and it was just, I mean, it was caught on a winter. That was a high loss for our area, for the Michiana beekeepers area. That was a 60% loss that year. And I caught them swarms into May, beginning of June. So that was pretty hardy stock. And it surely wasn't my bees because I lost all but one.
So it was really the swarms or the splits?
Well, and I can't say that leaving them all honey wasn't a variable too. It's just a combination of several things. But learning to split is definitely a plus. This past winter, I built about 400 egg boxes, which I'll start using instead of doing the full high body splits. I'll start getting them queens going in the nukes, super up more of the colonies, maybe use one, maybe go 6 supers so I can super up more, get my queens going, and then pull Frankfurt brood once it catches the black locusts. Yes?
I'm surprised at those swarms. I just read Top Secret says that only about 2 swarms out of every 25 swarms, feral swarms, will survive the first winter. Because anything after a certain date, they don't have enough time to drop enough combs and put away enough honey. I'm surprised you had that many swarms.
Well, you also got to take in the account the number of colonies I lost the previous year and all the brand new drawn comb I had from the previous year. I let them swarms only draw comb for about 10 to 12 days. Then them bees will not draw any more new comb until that first brood emerges and them bees are 7 days old. So that's another thing. Once a swarm draws that comb up in the 10 to 12 day period, if you add equal amount of drawn comb at day 13, you can double the population of that colony in 3 weeks versus making that swarm draw that next round of comb. See what I mean?
No. Yeah. What's the drone frame?
The drawn frame. Drawn frame.
Oh, yeah, you're saving all of that.
Because there's 35,000 cells for 1 pound of wax. So it takes the workforce of approximately 22,000 bees to draw up the wax in a bee. Okay? So for every frame of drawn comb that you give to a hive, that's like giving them 2,200 bees. So that's the workforce it took. So a whole deep is like throwing on a 7-pound swarm. So that's the workforce it took to draw out that deep. You can't just think in terms of bees, you got to think in terms of resources also, and what it takes to bring resources in. These are just another part of it. Yes?
You're raising a queen separate. What about requeen? How often do you?
I don't. I just wait till they go to that superseed mode, and I don't requeen. There's no reason to.
So you're raising your queens to do what?
Make more hives.
Oh.
Splits.
Versus splitting them big hives early. I can do it a little bit later now. But I already got queens going, basically. Yes.
I gotta ask you again, when do you start supering again? Was it like mid-March?
End of March, in April.
End of March.
Before,
When they bring pollen in.
about 2 weeks after they bring that fresh pollen in.
Oh, okay.
It's critical to get them on before that queen cell, that swarm cell start date. Once them bees start making drones, you need to have them supers on basically before them drones emerge, because once drones emerge, 16 days later they're mature enough. So as soon as the drone emerges, they can start queen cells right then, because she's going to be mature enough. The timing of maturities are correct.
And it's about 2 weeks after you see the fresh pollen.
Correct.
Okay. Thanks.
Yes.
Go over again the 3 deeps and using the super with new foundation to prevent the queen from growing up. You know, instead of using the queen exclude.
Because I'm putting drawn comb also, if you just put all drawn comb, there's nothing stopping that queen from just going boop.
Okay.
If you got a highly prolific queen, she can just run up right the middle, and she might only do one frame,
But she won't go over that.
a brand new foundation, I have not had one. Now, once they start drawing, it's possible that she can lay on that, if it's full with the queen. But since that next box was all drawn home, they fill that first on a flow before they start drawing.
Oh,
You see what I mean? So this is full by the time this gets drawn.
okay. So they put it there.
What's that again?
Sorry, do you put another one, empty one under that one?
You could, yes. If you got the time to do it.
Yeah.
Because now you get so many hives, it becomes a timing issue of. But yes, you could. If you wanted to draw a comb, as soon as they start drawing, you can keep rotating brand new foundation down until they're not drawing anymore.
Do that whack it to the foundation wall or just?
Yes, because I don't use anything in my colonies, I do re-wax my plastic foundation. I know there's nothing in my wax.
You buy plastic foundation without any wax on it? Or very little?
They put very little on it anyways.
And then how do you spread that wax into the brush?
Just brush it on hot, yeah. One more question, who has it? Okay, nobody.